Hello, welcome to today's video looking at the context of Christianity with Stevenson's novella. Well, Stevenson is writing at a time when probably 95% of his readers are Christian, raised as Christians, and have um, a profound belief in God. But this is a belief that is starting to be changed by the advances in science and medicine. So just as the differing appearances of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde play upon the theories emerging from Charles Darwin's work, so their differing personalities explore contemporary debates about moral behaviour and the possible plurality of human consciousness. So as medical science became better, people asked themselves, well, what on earth is going on with the brain? If all our thought is in the brain, um, where is our mind? You know, the things that make up our personality, and where is our soul? So the more scientists discovered about what organs were for, the less room there was um, for physically finding a point which showed where the mind was or where the soul was. And from this debate, we get this idea that that actually proves that there's a God. There isn't a physical cause for the way our thoughts combine and give us a sense of identity in mind. And similarly, you can't find the soul, which by definition ended up being the proof that it was there. Um, it was intangible. It was the thing that made you special. However, other scientists began to question that and ask whether consciousness was just a product of the brain and a product of evolution. So one way of looking at the creation of Hyde is to say that, well, this is what man is like without a soul, simply acting on impulse and instinct. And therefore, Jekyll is made up of Hyde, that man without the soul, and the soul element that therefore tries to make him more good, more Christian, if you like. So one reading is that Christianity is very much at play here, and Stevenson supports Christianity in order to show how without Christianity, without Christian belief, we all become Hydes. However, you can interpret the novel the other way and show that the only things that are controlling Hyde are social convention. It's not really Jekyll's soul at all. Um, it's just how he's been taught to behave by society and what he can get away with. And it's only because he thinks he might be caught that he behaves in a moral way. In other words, man's moral behavior isn't connected to any evidence of God. It's purely connected to the ability to get away with your crimes or not be disapproved of by wider society. By literally splitting the two consciousness of Dr. Jekyll into two, the decent side that attempts and largely succeeds in suppressing desires that run contrary to the dictates of society, and the amoral, which means not thinking about whether something's morally good or not, just acting on instinct, the amoral side that runs riot in an attempt to gratify animal desire, Stevenson explores in a heightened fashion the battles played out in every one of us. So another way of looking at that is that he creates this over-dramatized situation to explore this idea that his readers were already thinking about at the time and that were already popular in lots of Gothic fiction. This leads me to a misunderstanding that many students have. Many students assume that Dr. Jekyll is good and Hyde is bad. Dr. Jekyll is a moral man and Hyde is immoral and evil. But actually, that is not what Stevenson is proposing in this novel. What he's proposing is that we're all like Dr. Jekyll, made up of sinful impulses or wicked ideas or evil, but that we control them through our consciousness and through our conscience, our sense of what's morally right and morally wrong. And this is what Dr. Jekyll says about it. This quotation, by the way, you should memorize because it will be relevant to any question you can possibly be asked. I saw that, of the two natures that contended in the field of my consciousness, even if I could rightly be said to be either, it was only because I was radically both. And so here, Jekyll is observing that everybody has this sin inside them. Well, that actually is a Christian view. So the Christian view is that man was born innocent. God created Adam and Eve as truly innocent individuals, but when they are tempted by the serpent in the Garden of Eden and they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, when they find out about good and evil, that is when they become radically both good and evil. So at this stage, we can argue that Stevenson believes we're all created like that because God has made us this way, and therefore this is still a Christian novel. Through Hyde, the respectable Dr. Jekyll is freed from the restraints imposed by society. My devil had been long caged, he came out roaring. And so, in using this deliberately Christian language, he's suggesting that we all have evil inside us, we all have a devil inside us, and it's our job in life to fight that. And Christian morality does that for you because you're continually trying to behave in a Christian way. So if we look at the novel like that, it's quite clearly a Christian morality story. And we can simply read the novel that way, as a Christian morality tale in which evil is eventually punished. So in his confession at the end of the book, Jekyll observes that ultimately he will have to choose between being Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. To become the latter, Mr. Hyde, would mean giving up on noble aspirations and being forever despised and friendless. To become Jekyll, however, means giving up the sensual and disreputable appetites he can indulge as Hyde. In spite of the curious circumstances of his own case, it is, as the melancholy Jekyll observes, a struggle and debate as old and commonplace as man. So really, this is Stevenson suggesting that we've been like that ever since Adam and Eve, ever since we were expelled from Eden, continually wondering whether to act on our animal impulses or not. Well, so far, so Christian. However, we can also argue that Stevenson rejects the Christian view. Let me show you how. What happens, of course, is that Hyde's evil overcomes Jekyll's Christianity and his ability to control his evil nature. So what his experiment does is reveal whether our animal-like desires are more powerful than our Christian morality and faith. And in this case, Hyde is more powerful, and so evil triumphs over our ability to try and control it. And we can see Jekyll and Hyde as a kind of test case, a test tube case, if you like, for that very idea. Are we creatures created by God, or actually are we just created by our society that controls our evil desires? And when you take society away, are we in fact just like animals acting on impulse and seeking personal gratification? Well, this novella says that we are. And so it is Hyde who kills Jekyll, not literally, but by never turning back into Jekyll again. Hyde becomes the dominant force. So Stevenson could be arguing that that animal impulse in us is our dominant force, is our nature. And what is holding us together is our education, our moral purpose, that we teach to each other as a society. Remember, it's only the fear of getting caught that causes Jekyll to worry about becoming Hyde. And we might argue that there are other social pressures. So we have social pressures in order to make friends and to be liked. Becoming Hyde would mean that he would be despised and friendless. That's not enough, though, to stop Jekyll experimenting with becoming Hyde. He doesn't seem to mind that. Okay, the other way that we can see the novel as anti-Christian is by thinking about the construction of Doctor Lanyon. Um, Lanyon doesn't need to be in the story. Um, he doesn't need to exist. The only thing he's needed for is to get hold of um, the salts that Hyde needs in order to turn back to Jekyll. But of course, it doesn't need to be Lanyon who does that. That could be Enfield who does it, or indeed it could be Poole. Um, it doesn't have to be Lanyon. The main purpose for Lanyon in the novel is the manner of his death and the letter that he leaves behind. So it's important to Lanyon to provide the views that Jekyll disagrees with. If you like, he is Dr. Jekyll's counterpoint. And Stevenson sets this up so that Lanyon is Christian. So let's look at what Jekyll says about Lanyon. That hidebound pedant Lanyon, at what he called my scientific heresies. Oh, I know he's a good fellow. You needn't frown. An excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him. But a hidebound pedant for all that. An ignorant, blatant pedant. I was never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon. So this repetition of the word pedant um, is really revealing. A pedant is someone who holds on to a belief or idea, and Jekyll is suggesting that this is an outdated idea, and he deliberately uses this religious language to talk about the science. And so he automatically sets up a conflict between what science is showing us and with what religion is showing us. Lanyon has dismissed what with what Jekyll is doing as a heresy, as going against God, whereas this is rejected by Jekyll because he sees it as proof that there isn't a God. Hyde is what we're really like, and God wouldn't create us that way. It goes against what the story of our creation is. So Jekyll rejects this idea of God. So our question now is, does Stevenson agree with Jekyll or does he agree with Lanyon? Well, let's have a further look. Lanyon chooses to die rather than live in a world that keeps somebody like Dr. Jekyll in it. Let's have a look. So just before Lanyon chooses to die, he meets Utterson and he says, if you can sit and talk with me of other things and not Dr. Jekyll, for God's sake, and then in God's name. So he clearly gives it a religious perspective, but that doesn't save him. He ends up dying of despair. And so one interpretation of that is that Dr. Lanyon realizes that there is no God. When he sees Hyde transform into Jekyll, he realizes that mankind is basically at root an animal, doesn't have a soul, isn't created by God, and is just stopped from behaving in evil ways by the conventions of society. When Hyde goes to Lanyon, so it's before this actually, but we find out about it later in the novella. When Hyde goes to Lanyon to get the salts to change back from Hyde into Jekyll, he tempts Lanyon just like Adam and Eve are tempted by the serpent, or Eve is, and just like Jesus is tempted by Satan in the desert. But Lanyon gives in to that temptation. So, if you shall so prefer to choose, a new province of knowledge and new avenues to fame and power shall be laid open to you, here, in this room, upon the instant, and your sight shall be blasted by a prodigy to stagger the unbelief of Satan. And he chooses these words really carefully. Hyde is promoting Satan and linking Satan to unbelief. And that's what he creates in Lanyon. When Lanyon sees the transformation of Hyde into Jekyll, he suddenly realizes that Satan, if you like, has won. Now, at the same time as you see that, when it's linked to unbelief, he gets rid of this knotty problem, which is this. If we believe in evil and linking evil with the devil, then we have also to believe in God. But by linking it in this cunning phrase here, the unbelief of Satan, it's another way of Stevenson saying, well, you can't believe in Satan because there isn't any God. There's just what we call evil, which is really animal instinct. And that, of course, links back to the discoveries of evolution from Charles Darwin, which basically says we are evolved from more primitive creatures. And it's that primitivism, that animalistic side to us, that we now perceive as evil because it just acts on desire without conscience. But our conscience isn't a product of a God who has made us better. It's just a product of our society that stops us acting in immoral ways through its laws. So it's having started off by saying, yep, you can interpret this as a Christian novel. I've now hopefully given you a way to interpret it as a novel which says there is no such thing as God. There is no such thing as the devil. Now, either of those interpretations are up to you. Yeah, I'm not telling you one's better than the other. One's right and one's wrong. That's not the point. It comes back to the idea of duality again, doesn't it? And that's what Stevenson's doing. He's pointing out that a lot of our thought, our religious belief, the way our society behaves, is all caught up in this duality. Now, he might have a solution to it, and it's up to you to decide what you think that is. Lanyon attempts to have the last word here in his letter, and he would definitely come back to the Christian viewpoint. So even though Hyde thinks he's destroyed Lanyon's Christianity, Lanyon still holds on to it. Oh God, I screamed, and oh God, again and again. So we can read that as proof that he still believes in God, or we can read it as his despair, because he keeps calling for God, but presumably God's help doesn't arrive. So you can still interpret it both ways. For there, before my eyes, pale and shaking, and half fainting, and groping before him with his hands, like a man restored from death, there stood Henry Jekyll. Well, that's a deliberate reference to the resurrection here, because obviously Jesus gets restored from death, and famously he restores the dead, Lazarus. And so it's a clear allusion to the New Testament account of Jesus. And it could be an ironic one because Henry Jekyll is the most ungodly type of person because he creates Hyde, or it could be a Christian one, a Christian allusion that says, well, there is still hope for Jekyll's soul if only he gets rid of Hyde. What he told me in the next hour, I cannot bring my mind to set on paper. I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard, and my soul sickened at it. So again, we've got this duality of interpretation. If his soul sickened at it, he still has a soul, and therefore God is his creator, and Christianity is still a valid belief. However, if his soul sickens at it, and therefore he dies, it may be that the soul is an illusion. It hasn't preserved him, and it's the same illusion that Christianity is. We're actually just animals. Well, you decide which way you want to jump with this novella because you can interpret it both ways. I hope you've understood the nature of Christian debate here. Good luck with your revision, and if you'd like more, don't forget to subscribe.